Hello and welcome to the For the English podcast, your one-stop shop for Venezuelan football in English, bringing you fortnightly episodes dedicated to the Venezuelan league, the national teams and the myriad of Venezuelan players around the world. Today we are joined by Mauricio Andrade, a Venezuelan football fan, but more than just that, also hoping to change the future of Venezuelan football and be a part of that change. Mauricio and some of his friends and family set up the Andrade Sports Group agency recently and hope to play an active role in the development and progression of Venezuelan football. Mauricio, thank you very much for joining us. How are you?
Hi, Jordan. How are you? Thank you for the invite. It's a pleasure to talk to you today on this platform, and I think it's a great idea on your end.
Thank you. We really always appreciate being able to have Venezuelans on our podcast, especially because we know we're an English language platform. So we really seize every opportunity to have English speaking guests on with the speciality, the background and the knowledge that you undoubtedly have. So we're really looking forward to getting some valuable insight today for ourselves and our listeners.
Yeah. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to speak with people that want to know a little bit more about Venezuelan football. And I think you guys with this idea and this platform, this podcast, are doing a fantastic job to trying to get people around the industry to talk about all these important topics that it's regarding the football in Venezuela.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be part of it. And with Kevin Vivas, the guy that manages Once Football, who's active as Football English, Kat Shepard, the former Caracas and Venezuela midfielder, and Dominic Besogna, a Venezuelan based in America, who's a Venex expert, basically. It's a really, makes my job very easy. It's a pleasure to have those people around me and to speak with people like yourself. So to get us started, Mauricio, tell us a bit about yourself and your background and relationship with Venezuelan football.
Sure. Well, I have been involved with football pretty much all my life. I played on youth level in Venezuela. Then when I graduated from high school, I moved to the U.S. I came to the U.S. to study English for a year. But while I was doing that, I started playing soccer on the local teams and travel teams in Miami, and I got a scholarship to play in Florida Atlantic University in Boca Raton. So I was able to do that while I was getting my degree. So kind of like everything changed, from a 1-year plan to a 14-year plan that has been my experience living in the States. So I lived here for 14 years. I studied, I worked, I started businesses related to football or soccer, how they call it over there. I was the owner of 2 indoor soccer facilities and soccer academies for toddlers, which is a very interesting kind of like business because it was different for me, but I saw it. The necessity for that type of programs, because
I used to coach 2 to 4 year olds.
Oh, really? So you will be like the perfect partner.
Yeah, there's a big coaching company in England called Little Kickers, and they
mine was called Little Strikers.
Yeah.
Very similar. Actually, I when I started the business, we saw the business plan or the business in the UK of Little Kickers, which is also in the US. So we did that like for 5-6 years. It was very interesting. For a young kid, I was only 25 back then when I started my own business. So it was kind of like getting out there, and I know a little bit of how to manage a business, from start to finish. So that was a very good experience while I was doing other stuff. And then back in 2015, I decided to go back to Venezuela to try it out because I never experienced living in Venezuela as an adult. Basically, I moved when I was 17, and then all my adult life I was basically living in the States. So
what year was it when you left Venezuela for the US?
2001.
And you returned in
2015.
Okay, so what were the like big noticeable differences in the Venezuelan football world?
Well, it definitely changed from the Venezuela that I left. That any of the professional clubs had basically youth teams. That was kind of like the first thing that I realized. It was like, well, it has really been an improve on that end. Professionalizing the youth system. I think that would be kind of like the big change that I saw, which we have seen the results of that by, obviously the national team has improved. The league itself has definitely improved. And then we see overseas more and more Venezuelan players going outside of
Yeah.
Venezuela. So
It's very easy for people to level criticism at Venezuelan football and those that are in charge of its organization, its development. But like you said yourself, a big change that you saw in those years was the development of youth teams and that organization. Who would you say, not necessarily individuals, but clubs, institution, rule changes, who would you give credit to for that development, and how would you defend your claim that it is developing?
well, I think it will be difficult to say, one club or one team, but I think Caracas FC has been kind of like the one that started with the development of starting U15s, U17s, and U20s, and then obviously other teams follow, but they have been always been very worried about the infrastructure. They were the first ones to also doing their first, training facility. I don't remember the name, the year when they did it, but it was always in terms of improving, the facilities and the options for the youth players and the development of their academy. So I will say that I think that there's other teams that haven't followed the path, and I think they're doing a fantastic job. As of right now, I went to the Deportivo La Guaira, just brand new training facility like a month ago. It's very, very nice with our, high quality fields and new offices, and they're doing like um, uh, administration offices, and also for the kids, for the kind of like la cantera to stay, like, let's say the home club. So I think that all these initiatives will definitely pay off in the future. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting that Caracas and Deportivo La Guaira are two teams that you name, because there's an obvious connection there in No Chita San Vicente, obviously crucial in Caracas's recent history, and also spent some time at Real Sport, the the precursor to Deportivo La Guaira, the same institution, and then obviously he is very much to this day credited with the strength of Zamora and getting things started there with their youth development, their attitude, their professionalization over the past 10 to 15 years. And from speaking to many people about this topic of youth development, they're the names that are mentioned. Those clubs, Noel San Vicente, Jose Hernandez, who was pivotal in Caracas's development of the youth teams and their structure and infrastructure there, and similarly credited with doing the same thing at Atletico Venezuela. So it's definitely something that I believe in. The development has obviously been a success, but something continuing. And what do you think now, in where we are now, 2021? What do you think the next steps are that are needed to continue that development of youth football, continue the professionalization of Venezuelan football? Because obviously there's still things that need to be done. What do you see as those next steps?
Great question. Yeah, well, I think it's a little bit of the same, not the same, but I mean the same idea, the same concept. I think every country, every federation that wants to really grow the sport is to invest in the infrastructure. invest in the youth systems, invest in better coaching programs. I think everything goes from the development. You know, if you have a strong base, then you grow from there. And I think if you see other examples in the atmosphere, you know, you will see. Well, look at the U.S. You know, the U.S. was a great example of how they're starting to become an exporting league, which 15 years ago would be unthinkable. You know, now you see U.S. players playing not only in Europe but at the highest level in Europe. You know, in teams like Juventus, Barcelona, Manchester City, Manchester United, Liverpool. You know, Borussia Dortmund. So you know, Bayern Munich. So you know, I think that's the next step. I think we have broke certain barriers that is the first step. You know, that we have this first quality of players that move like Arango, Rey, those that type of players back then in the 90s. They started, and now this second wave of players are starting to go to higher level. I think the next one will be to have a Venezuelan player like Rincon that was able to make it to Juventus, but be sustainable at that level. You know, unfortunately, he only had one season, but having a player to stay at a top tier team in Europe will be something that I think will help future generation of players. You know,
Is there any player right now that you'd put your finger on and say, I think this is the guy to do it next? Like for me, Yangel Herrera seems an obvious choice. Obviously, he's in the quarterfinals of the Europa League as a key man for Granada, owned by Manchester City. And just of yesterday, a local journalist in Manchester has said that there's interest from Southampton Football Club and West Ham United taking him next season. And no more details on that, be it a loan or a transfer. But, you know, he's certainly a player that many say have the technical aspects and also the right mentality to succeed at that top level.
Yes, I agree with you. I think seeing this generation of Venezuelan players, the one that I really think has that potential to make it not only a Southampton or West Ham, but I think he has the level to play at a higher at the high level. I will say that if I would be Manchester City, I would really look into keeping him for one season and see how he develops within that team, especially if Fernandinho is in his last year of contract. I think he will be a great option, especially if it's your player, you know, already. You don't have to purchase him. So I will consider that option, and but I don't know. I don't have the inside information if that's a case or not. I hear a journalist the other day, a South American journalist, while he was commentating the game of City, saying that apparently City is looking into that option, but I don't have a source to tell you if that's the case or not. But yeah, I think Soteldo has good potential as well. Obviously, he's a fantastic player. I think his height doesn't help him in Europe, where they look a lot into that. But I think he has the ability to develop in Europe, and I think he should be moving there soon. I don't know if at the highest, what level of league or team, but I think he should be trying Europe soon.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So with your experiences in the US, with your various soccer ventures, you've come to the decision to start the Andrade Sports Group. What made you first decide that that's something you wanted to do, and what do you aim to offer? What role, what place in Venezuelan football do you hope to take?
Well, yeah, I had this idea of becoming an agent a while ago. I think when I started the indoor soccer facility, kind of in the back of my mind was kind of like to get a feel of what being involved with the sports would look like, no? But I was always waiting for the right moment, and I was always with other businesses that I started and other responsibilities. So I was always like putting it back, like let's wait for the perfect moment. And then back in 2019, I decided, you know what, the perfect time is when you do things. And I need to, if I really didn't want to keep waiting, as and then regret myself, which I kind of do because I see the potential of how things are going, and if we would have started a few years ago, we would be in a better position right now. But you can never go back in time. So I guess things are going very well, and yeah, I always thought that combining my two passions with which is business and sports or football would be a great idea, because I think when you do things with that you really enjoy, things go the right way sooner or later. So it's obviously a business that it takes time to develop. It's a long-term investment and a long-term project, because it's not like you're just buying a bottle of water and selling it with a profit. You have to invest in the players. Sometimes you have to invest on the players when they're a younger age, try to take the best talents. So yeah, I think the plan for this type of business should be 3 to 5 years. That's kind of like what I have in my mind. But obviously trying to do the things the best way possible to short that time, and try to be financially, to make sense financially, and in a shorter period of time.
Yeah. So one thing that is interesting about the football agency world and public perception of agents is that they often get a bad rap. A lot of people are very cynical about agents and their involvement in the game, but it's not something I particularly agree with at all. I think agents can add a lot of value to a player's career. But as somebody directly involved in that world, what would you say that your agency offers, and perhaps more widely, where is the value added from having active agents in a professional player's career?
Yes, well, I agree with you. I think there is a lot of bad reputation with agents, worldwide. I don't think it's only in Venezuela or in a specific market. I think it's a worldwide issue, and I kind of agree in certain way. I have seen. I think like you have good lawyers, bad lawyers, good doctors, bad doctors. You have good agents.
It's an understandable conclusion that people have come to, but it's not a reputation that every agent or every agency warrants.
Exactly. No, yeah, and I think part of the idea of our business plan or our proposal is do that. Try to do things in a professional way, in a clear way, be very, very open in terms of being transparent with the clubs and with the players that we represent, or the players that we intermediate, because we're trying to do both things. Obviously, I think the representation of the players what actually adds more value, but if you're in this industry, you have to try to do both things. That's my vision. Because as you grow up and you start developing relationship in different markets, obviously people start requesting your opinions or helping out with players, and that's also valuable as part of the job. But I think clubs need to understand that they're good agents and they're not all bad. They're actually agencies that they're trying to do things correctly and trying to do things in a way to help the players, not only to win a quick buck and only win the commission on a transaction. And I think that's what I try to do. That's a value that we try to do as an agency, to be, allied with the correct partners that share the same vision, our values and ethics. And I think that the best way is to show them how we work and how we can add value to their clubs as well. Because there, like I said, there are many that they have been in the industry for a while, and they're used to do things in a certain way that I don't agree is the right way in certain ways. So
yeah, so it's really interesting what different agencies can offer as their USP, if you like a unique selling point. And it's obviously a market where there are many players and many agents. In England, for example, there's more registered agents than there are registered players. That's
imagine, that's crazy. Well, and I think adding to that, I think that's part of the problem. I think in 2015, when the FIFA decided to change the rules of the registration of sports agents, or FIFA agents, how they call it before, and make it, individually per federation, and each federation had the responsibility of the registration of these intermediaries, which they changed the name of it. I think that also didn't help. I know from several conversation with colleagues that there, advanced conversation of changing the rules back into next year. Where, yeah, they are, and I think that will help. I think you need to you need to be prepared to be an agent and to be an intermediary. It's a big responsibility. You need to have a basic knowledge of legal concepts, legal contractual laws, financial, at least a financial background. I think an agent needs to be an all-around person that can have a little bit of knowledge. Obviously, if you're not a lawyer, you can also have, a lawyer on your team, or hire a lawyer, or have a partner, a commercial ally that's a law firm that specializes in sports, to help you. But I think they leave it like way too open, and that's when you have these guys that really don't have a professional background working in the industry, and putting the name of the agent in a bad place, I think.
100%. And I think some of the changes that are mooted for the next year from FIFA in terms of agency, I don't think are going to be helpful. In some ways they will be, because it's insisting, if you like, on an increased level of professionalization from the agents. But also I think there's changes, especially changes that are going to become global, where, for example, with percentages of commissions, at the moment it varies from confederation to confederation, and also the length of time a player can be signed with an agency differs around the world. A lot of these things they're going to try and bring level. One thing I worry about is the percentage commission that FIFA are going to allow agents to earn on players' salaries, for example, is going to be lowered again. The reason why I personally think this is a bad thing, or could be a bad thing, is it's already fairly low, and they're in Europe, I'm talking about, and they're considering lowering it to 3%. For me, one problem with this is it's going to encourage football, soccer, depending on where you're listening from today, to become, I think, more alike to how US sports have been traditionally, where players are moving a lot, like very, very often, because agents that are money driven or money focused are going to be looking to where they're going to earn their money, and it's going to be in transfers. Because if you lower the amount an agent can earn on players' salaries, they're going to look to move the players and make transfers more regularly, because that's where the financial income is going to be. And one conversation that I've had with a couple of players in Venezuela, because I think this is the second problem to address, or something that needs improving, is players' education on agents. What to look for in a good agent, what to look for as an indication of a bad agent, and also how to identify an agent. Like, it's ridiculous. I know so many players in Venezuela who say they're signed to an agent. They're not. They've got a representative who isn't a licensed agent or
Right.
doesn't even know anything, but they
Exactly.
entrust in this player, they entrust in this person, and it is a massive, massive hindrance to their career, because that
Yeah.
person who's claiming to be their agent, even if the player has some form of signed contract with them, the person's not an agent, and so the worst ones aren't going to be able to properly defend their player or fight for their rights with clubs. They're not going to be able to get them the moves that they need. And this is another place for me where I think a lot of the general public maybe don't realize with agents is we as consumers of football, particularly I talk as a 27-year-old who have grown up playing FIFA and Pro Evo and Football Manager, like
Mhm.
we take control of a club and we look at players at other clubs and we buy them.
Right.
But that's not exactly how it works. Like a lot of players, and
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about Venezuela now, a lot of players will never leave Venezuela, no matter how good they are, if they don't have a
The right
well-connected
agent.
agent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of players in Venezuela who are managed, and I say managed rather than have an agent, by somebody who has just identified a talent, has developed a relationship with that player and signed them,
Mm-hmm.
and I just sat on them hoping that a big club sees them and signs them one day, because
Right.
they don't, as an individual, have the ability to improve that person's career. And I
Yeah.
think
And there is something more to it that also, it's, I think the role of the agent has many roles, obviously, within an agency, you have to take care of a lot of things. But I think the most important part, and a lot of agents don't do it, and a lot of players don't realize how important it is, and it's a day to day, and the things that the agency will do for you to improve. Because if you are in, let's say, in Venezuela, and obviously at an international level, Venezuela is still a third tier league in terms of the international market. So even that we are developing a lot of good players and a good talents, the perception of the market is that this kid or this player needs to be, you know, uh, breaking records at the Venezuelan level to go outside, and sometimes a lot of players, they think that because they make it to the first team and they see other players going around, that's enough, which I think it's not. I always put the example with my players, if you see, you know, the guys at the highest level, Cristiano Ronaldo, Messi, Sergio Ramos, you name it, they invest thousands of dollars on extra training, extra coaching, physical work, personally, so how come a player that is just playing in Venezuela not looking into doing those kind of things? So that's kind of like one of the added value that we're seeing, as something that we're trying to do differently, really looking at the player, analyzing what they have right now and how we can plan and potentialize that player in the next 12 months. You could say, different things, it could be mental, it can be physical, it can be, an all around training program. But at the end of the day, I see it that way. I think the more focused that a player is, the more time that they invest on themselves, and that we can help them to do that, the higher chance you have to develop into a player that will be interesting for the international markets. Because I always say, I can give you all the resources, I can put you all the tools on the table, but if you don't develop, if you don't do it, and you don't start showing on the field all this work that we're doing, then I'm not a magician. It has to be, I'll do my part outside of the field, but the player needs to show within
Yeah.
the field.
So if I was a player, without giving away your trade secrets, if you have any, how would you like convince me to sign with your agency? What do you think you can offer players that perhaps other agencies don't? Or
Well, I think at the end of the day, Jordan, it's I think that the player agent relationship goes a lot with empathy. So, um, for me to be interested in a player, it not only have to be a great player, but it has to be a player that I feel there is a connection, in terms of the type of player that I want to represent. I think you have to look at an all around picture and have the same values and kind of like the same thing of working with another agencies or another clubs. There has to be a share of values and ethics and way of doing things. So I think that goes naturally. I will probably approach you once I know that you are 100% a player that I would like to represent. And then we'll have to go from there. I think I will try to talk you through what I can do for you in terms of different things, not only that I will promise you to take you to Barcelona or Real Madrid, which is kind of like what a lot of agents do, but more of how I see you as a player and how I can increase your potential by work and investing on you. I'm not gonna sign with a player that is interested on money. I will never offer a player money to sign with me, and I will never offer, like I'm gonna give you 10 cleats or I'm gonna give you this or that. That comes along with the work. I would rather invest on you on things that cost money, because if I take you to a psychologist, if I have a personal trainer for you, if I take my time to talk to you every day, to help you to fix issues on your day-to-day basis, and I put all these resources around, I expect the same from you. I expect 100% from your time and from your will to improve and to get to the next level. So I think that's kind of like my my view of how we
No, no,
trying to do things.
yeah, and it's definitely it's definitely a similar story, very similar story to talking to some other agencies about their approach. But one thing I find interesting is perhaps how some players perceive or receive that message from you when you first have that conversation. That is, you've spoken very honestly with a lot of clarity and no promises, no guarantees, that kind of thing, and an emphasis on hard work and a mutual relationship. Has that been like a shock for some players to hear? Because I know a lot of young players have this misconception perhaps of agents, like they're going to be the ones to give you creatine and football boots and etc.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like the perception that I got. No, the feedback is that most players are offered that. I offer you, class A boots and proteins and a call every 6 months. So I think obviously there's different approaches, and there's also the time in the market. Obviously there a lot of agencies now, they're in a stage where they, or that's how they have been doing business for the last 10 years, is a quantity game, not a quality. Obviously quality is important for them because they try to sign as many players as they can, but let's say they sign, I don't know, 50 players or 40 players, and then out of that 40, they know there's a percentage that it's going to make it to the next level, or they can, they will be a product to export, and then the rest, it kind of like falls behind, and they don't take care of those players, but they sign them, so they have them kind of like attached in a way or committed with them. I saw that. I don't see it that way. I don't share that way of doing it. But if it works for other agencies, it's it's beautiful for them. I just think if I'm gonna invest the time, if I'm gonna sign a player, it's because I want to invest the time and the resources to help them, because I think it's a big responsibility to be an agent, and to you're not just buying and selling a product, you're managing the career of a person, of a human being. So I take that with a high responsibility.
So one thing we haven't discussed so far, and as we're recording this, we're a couple of days away from, is the start of the new season. Liga Football 2021 is finally upon us. after a couple of delays, some uncertainty. It's finally here. What are your predictions? What are your hopes for this season? It would be nice to talk about the Venezuelan Football League being back.
Yeah. Yes, well, I'm very excited. I'm very excited because, obviously for us that work in this industry, that's that's the main show, and I think it has been difficult times in general worldwide, but I think for us it has been even more difficult because if you see the other leagues in South America, they haven't stopped playing. They stopped playing obviously at the beginning of the pandemic, but then since August, September, everyone kind of like got started, and then they finished in December like we did, but they started right away. So we see it as a disadvantage, especially for the teams that were playing in international cups like Suramericana, Pre-Libertadores. It was difficult. You see the game Caracas against Junior. Junior had 10 games before that game. Caracas had 2. So it has been difficult. So for us it's very important to start, especially for us that are working on the markets, to get the players enough playing time so they can be prepared for summer transfers if that's the case, or being prepared for the summer window.
So we've got a 3-group system this season, a change from last, which was a change in itself, of
Right.
2 groups. How do you see those groups playing out? Who do you think the teams to watch are for perhaps the group leaders? And are there any teams that you're surprised by with their transfer window? For me, I'm surprised and excited by the transfer window of Hermanos Colmenares. I think they've had a very astute window of signings, be it the Colombian that they've brought in, Ricardo Delgado, as well as the Colombian they've kept, Juan Camilo Zapata, who I know there was interest in from some big teams in Venezuela and the rest of the continent. They've also signed some astute players with good history in Liga Football. Melo in midfield, captain previously with Zamora and Deportivo Táchira with league titles to his name. So for me, that's been the most exciting. I think the most impressive window perhaps is Deportivo Táchira. I think they've put together a very strong team, with obviously one eye on Copa Libertadores group stages. So yeah, what are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, I agree with you. I think the 2 teams that are going up and playing first division, coming from the second, Hermanos Colmenares and UCB, it's going to be interesting. UCB, it's with a new way of doing things, and getting a lot of loan players, and youth players that could be interesting to see how they develop on a first division level. But yeah, the big ones, I think, obviously Deportivo Táchira and Deportivo La Guaira, because they're playing group stage of Libertadores, have been taking the time and the investment to bring good quality players, experienced players, not only in the Venezuelan league but overseas. So I think I'm looking forward to see how they do at the international stage, and I think locally they're going to be very difficult to beat. I think for me are the 2 favorites, again, but obviously there are many teams that are have talented players, and I think this COVID situation has opened doors for teams to also invest or try to give some opportunities to the youth players. So we'll see how these players develop, and what are going to be the new surprises. Also, I think Academia Puerto Cabello also made a big investment, bringing a few experienced players. We'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see. I think
they've got tonight, as we're recording, a tough challenge on their hands. They're 2-0 down to Metropolitanos, but they're also 2-0 down to a Metropolitanos managed by Jose Maria Moore, who I think is an exceptional coach. I think it's going to be very hard for them to turn that around. I don't see a Maria Moore team losing a 2-0 lead. And I think a lot of Academia Puerto Cabello's transfers have been with perhaps the hope or maybe even expectation to be in the group stages of Sudamericana. But at least they'll have a very strong team left for their league season, which, it could be come the weekend the only competition they're left in. I haven't heard any mention of Copa Venezuela taking place this year.
I haven't either. I think one of the things to 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 take in consideration is to try to get as many games as possible. I think that that's the most important thing for the league players, and I'm very worried about the youth um, teams, no, and the youth players and the youth system, because they have been the ones that are being more affected by this
Has there
pandemic.
been any confirmation of the City Oro at Sub-20 or
I
Sub-18?
haven't heard. No, I haven't heard because before this last wave of cases of COVID that actually have kind of like worse the situation, all the youth systems were active and they were starting to have friendlies and games, and I think it was a matter of time where they announced the time of the leagues starting. But now with these new waves, I know most of the youth teams are not training at this moment or only partially, so it's kind of like a setback in a way. But hopefully they will start sooner rather than later.
Absolutely. So before we wrap up, what I would like from you is 3 under 20 players that you think we should look out for this season, and 3 players over the age of 20 that you think could leave Liga Football this season.
I cannot talk about mine players, right?
You can if you want, or you can separate it. You can give us your predictions, and then you can also say keep an eye on X.
Oh well, I think there are many interesting players. Top of my mind, under 20s. I think there is. Well, you put me kind of like in a difficult spot, so I think I'm gonna pass on this one. But I think there is many players to look into it. Like I said, I think there is youth, a lot of youth players that if COVID didn't hit, probably didn't have or would not have the opportunities they're gonna be having this year. So I think there's gonna be a lot of new surprises and new players. So we'll see. We'll see. I think there are many players that are very interesting under 20 and over 20. I think there are players that actually are in a stage of being very close to go to play in the outside of Venezuela. And it's just a matter of getting a good season and they will be out. So we'll see.
I still have my fingers crossed that the under 20 South American Championship will take place in one way or another this year.
Yeah.
For
that generation, it's kind of unfortunate that they canceled the World Cup, but at least to have a South American tournament will be very beneficial for these players, because they're at a very critical age, and having that type of experience will definitely help them develop as an international player. So I really hope that they put a date for that as well, and the best of luck for that team that it's developing. And they have been doing the right things, which it's getting the group together and training, and I think they had like 2 or 3 models so far. So and it's a new coach with new ideas. I don't know him personally yet, but I know various friends that do, and they talk about him very well. So
I was very impressed with how he did with Trujillanos last season. They were a nice team to watch as well, and they're obviously players with character, with value, with values, I mean, rather than monetary value, but they're good moral values, and really strong-willed players, because it was a difficult year for Trujillanos, and a lot of the players all of the players can hold their head up high with how they carried themselves, and a lot of credit has to go to Martin Carrillo, who obviously was the leader for that, and I'm really excited to see what he can do with the under 20s.
Yeah, me too. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to a great season. Hopefully it goes well in terms of the cases of COVID going down, and hopefully sometime within the league we can start having some public on the games. I think people are really looking forward to watch some football live, no?
Yeah,
But everyone all over the world. Like I was watching yesterday CONCACAF Champions League, Leon against America, and seeing players how they are excited about being with a little bit of public. It's just it's amazing. I think the sports needs fans on their stands. So
perfect. Yeah, I completely agree.
that,
Completely agree.
yeah.
And I really, when I was in Venezuela, as small as some of the crowds were, like it's just great to see that passionate in the stands. And I think one thing about the Venezuelan crowds that you do get at games is, you know, they are the hardcore, they are the most passionate. The ones that still go and are still there are the ones that were always going to be creating the noise, whether the stadium was 10% full or 80% full.
Right, exactly. No, and that's something that going back to what we can do to improve the sport in Venezuela, I think it's working on that edge, you know, improving the experience of the fans at the stadiums. I think that's something that we really should look into it as a whole, as everybody that is involved in football in Venezuela, trying to look and share ideas. I always said that to clubs, you know, I'm open to share ideas, to bring, you know, initiatives to try to improve the sport in general. So I think obviously because of pandemic, it's difficult to start those initiatives, but I think something that we really should look into it.
Absolutely. I think we could keep talking about many topics, and that's good because it means I definitely think we should do this again. So thank you very much for coming on, Mauricio. It's
No,
been a pleasure to have you on, and as always, always honoured to have such insightful guests, and you're another insightful guest. So thank you very much.
thank you so much for the invite, Jordan. It was a pleasure, and hopefully we can do it again.